right, welcome back to our river change part 3, our Rio Nuevo. This will be part 2 of part 3 in our Rio Nuevo. And we're really going to be focusing on the resilience aspect of ecosystems again, and also looking at some more scenarios, and then also what we can do to help our bosque. So first, I just want to do another reminder of what a resilient ecosystem is and what it means to be resilient. So a resilient ecosystem is able to withstand or bounce back from changes or stress. So just like in the example that we heard in the last part with the prescribed burn, you can see here that before the fire was very lush and green and really dense. And then post-fire, it was really barren, there wasn't much happening. And then 2 years post-fire, a lot of that vegetation was able to come back to the area and grow back. So that is a resilient ecosystem. So what does a resilient ecosystem need? So there's a few examples, but an ecosystem might need to have a diversity in order to be resilient. So what does diversity mean? Diversity means that there are many types of plants or animals within the area. So there's many different species of plants or animals, and having all of those different plant species and animals creates a mosaic. So a mosaic is a diversity of habitat and plants and animals that are all at different stages. So let's go over more about mosaic and what that really means. So oftentimes when we think about a mosaic, we might think about an art piece. So as an example here, on the left, I have a picture of a bunch of tiles that are put together, and they're all of different colors, but when you add them all together, they create one image. Within our bosque image, we have multiple different life stages. So for example, we have our cottonwood seedlings, we have some saplings like those teenagers, and also adult cottonwoods. So that helps us create our mosaic. We also have many different types of habitat within our ecosystem. So some examples of different habitat we have are ponds, we have grassy meadows, and then we have forests too with our bosque. And then the river in itself is its own ecosystem. There's many things that just live in the river that don't live anywhere else. And then again, we have our various plant stages, not only in cottonwoods, but also in our riparian shrubs and just other vegetation. So the example that we worked on together last time was our Albuquerque Overbank project, also called AOP, and that is where they manually lowered the bank. So by manually lowering the bank, that allowed that area to have a mosaic again. So on this picture on the left, you can actually see the different areas that were formed within the space. So you can see that there are areas of just coyote willow. There's areas that are mixed between willows and cottonwoods. We have some areas that are really sparse and don't have much vegetation there. But we also have some wetlands in the area, which is really cool that we were able to get so many different ecosystems and little mini habitats within that project by just manually lowering the banks. And you can see that as the time went on, the increase in the number of native species went up in that area. So do you think this type of restoration should happen in other parts of the bosque? Should we get more folks out and manually lower banks to other areas in the bosque? And one big thing that I really like to think about is that there are a lot of changes going on in our bosque and in our ecosystem, and these changes are probably going to happen, and they are happening even without us wanting them to or not. So we need to think about how we as humans and the ecosystem can adapt to these changes. However, there are some limitations with that. So some of these limitations is that many of these changes are very permanent changes. So an example of a permanent change is Cochiti Dam. So what do you think would happen if we did take down Cochiti Dam? It would be really hard to do so, but what do you think would happen if we did? And another pretty permanent change is our levees and our ditches. We use a lot of the levees and ditches for a very specific reason. So what do you think would happen if we took those out as well? And then we also have a lot of environmental changes that are happening too. We have many different plants and animal shifts. So there's a lot less native plants and animals, and they also might not be here forever. So an example that I really like to think of with that is that our cottonwoods, they rely on a lot of water, and in our ecosystem right now, we are very limited on water. So if we don't have enough water for our cottonwoods, what would happen to them? And one thing that might happen to them is if they are not able to reproduce and continue new lives of cottonwoods, then that large canopy tree might get replaced by something else, and it could potentially be replaced with a Siberian elm, which is an exotic tree, but it also has that large canopy tree, but it's not an exotic tree. And then some other environmental changes that we're currently facing is climate change. So we have been in a pretty bad drought recently, and each year seems to be being drier than the last. I know this year has been really dry and was definitely one of the driest years on record. So what impacts might this have on our ecosystem? And what about your favorite part of the ecosystem? And do you think it might impact the humans in the ecosystem? And also, are all communities impacted the same? So think about our Pueblo communities, those within the city, independent farmers. Are they all impacted equally by having less water in our river, or are some impacted more than others? And I also encourage you to check out one of our other games called Birds and Us Migration Game, because it really talks a lot about how communities or different communities are impacted by changes. And one in this example is climate change, but that'll help understanding that a little bit more. So we talked about some environmental changes. We talked about some changes that are permanent that humans have put in, but there's also a lot of questions that come in with all of that. And the first one is, how expensive is it to reverse some of these changes or to restore some parts of the ecosystem? So for example, it'll cost a lot of money to take out some of the permanent changes, like the dam. It'll cost a lot of money. Or it takes a lot of money to remove exotic trees, because you have to get the equipment out there, you need to have people out there, and then you need to pay them to actually remove the native or the exotic trees. And then one more question that we haven't talked about is, who has access to water that's in the river, and how much do they need to sustain themselves? So I really want you to think about all of the communities that live near the river. So think about the farms, the cities near the river, the pueblos, and more people that live near the river. So who has access to this water, and how much do they need? So thinking about that and thinking about how much water different communities need, and if we don't have that much water, how can they get that water in order to survive and to feed themselves, and also thinking about the changes that have been implemented in our bosque, and not feeling like we can do anything about them because a lot of them are permanent changes. It can be very stressful and a lot to think about. So if you're getting overwhelmed right now or just confused about what might happen, that's okay. And I just really want to remind you to take a moment to yourself and to take a breath. And if you need to, you can pause the video, take some breaths, think about everything that we've covered, and then join us back for the rest of our session, which I hope will be able to leave you with a positive vision of our bosque. Because there are some things that you can do to help our bosque and its ecosystem. So first, I want you to think about what you can do to help our bosque ecosystem, and also what you might already be doing, because a lot of people are trying their best to help our ecosystem. So think about what you can do and what you might be doing first. So you definitely can make a difference. And a few things that I like to do or try to do when I can is using less water. So either by taking shorter showers or turning the faucet off when I remember, things like that. I also can pick up trash while I'm out along the bosque or walking around my neighborhood whenever I see it. I think it's really important to educate ourselves on both social and environmental justice issues because that is one way that we really can just share knowledge with our community, and knowledge is very powerful. So it's important for us to continue learning about history and just the state of the ecosystem. And then we can also write an elected official. And you can either write them physically or write them in an email. But there are areas to go to or websites that you can go to figure out who your elected officials are. And then I also really like to try to be responsible with my financial decisions. And I really like to support organizations that I do have shared beliefs in, and not support organizations that I do not have shared beliefs in. And then when possible and when I feel safe to do so, I do like to attend public hearings, maybe some demonstrations or other organized efforts. So think about things that you might do either from this list, or if they're not on this list, that is also great. And I encourage you to keep doing it. So with that, I'm going to leave us with one final question that we have heard at the very beginning of this lesson, and that is, do you think that the river and its bosque should look like it did in the past? And what do you think the future river and the bosque could look like? Thank you so much for sticking with me through all of these questions and through a lot of back and forth of what might happen and positive and negative results of those things that could happen, and kind of a lot of information to digest at that time. But it is important to be hopeful because there is hope. I'm very hopeful that our bosque will continue to stay beautiful and we'll be able to work together on it, both us and the bosque benefiting each other. And that, remember, you can make a difference, and it is important that you share your beliefs, and if you really care about something, let people know. It's really great to share that information. So thank you all so much. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us either on our social media accounts or through our website, bemp.org. But I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for working on the River of Change series with me, and I will see you next time. Bye.